and thank you so much for being here. My name is Maja Moldenhauer, and I am an executive producer and artist at StudioMDHR, who has had the pleasure of working on Cuphead. I'm extremely grateful and humbled to be here today, so thank you for joining. But I'm representing an entire team of insanely talented people. I joined forces with the brothers back in 2014 when things started getting serious. And by serious, I mean we considered quitting our day jobs and going full-time on this passion project. But let's not start there. Let's go back, way back to 1986, which was actually the seed. You see, Chad and Jared are the co-founders of StudioMDHR, but more importantly, they are brothers and best friends. They have had an affinity for video games ever since their very first console, the Sega Master System. And from there, they would spend an obscene amount of time in the basement with our cousins and their friends, dissecting games that they loved, liked, and even hated. We only ever dreamed of making a video game to our liking, but it was never palpable. From our lens, it was only ever these mammoth companies with millions of dollars that could make a video game. That was until the indie scene began to explode. When I got a call from the DICE organizers to be a speaker here today, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little hesitant, mainly because you have likely heard about how Cuphead is a run-and-gun, action-based platformer with a heavy focus on boss battles. Every single frame of animation is hand-drawn and inked on paper. All the backgrounds are custom watercolor paintings, and there's nearly 3 hours of custom-composed jazz and ragtime music using a nearly 40-piece ensemble. What could an indie developer from Canada possibly talk about that might captivate an audience with the most colorful resumes in the industry? And then I thought, maybe it's just that. As such, I'm not standing here before you today as an industry leader with a wealth of experience, but more as a fresh set of eyes to help remind you of what it was like to operate with limited resources, from time to staff and definitely, but how we never let those stand in our way. Today you'll hear a little bit about my personal story of working on Cuphead, how it is one of sacrifice, it is one of growth and discovery towards something great. It is one from the trenches in the wee hours of the morning to the late hours of the night. It is one of having a vision and never compromising. One of the most common things that I get asked is how I even got started. I am the youngest of 4 children in my family, 6 years younger than my closest sibling, so a pleasant surprise for my parents. So naturally, I grew up on my own a little bit, but I always had a sketchbook attached to my hand. I was always drawing or painting, doing calligraphy, basically anything creative. Fast forward a few years, and I went to university. I have my degree in biomedical science with a minor in physics, with the intention of potentially applying to med school. The only problem there is I actually faint at the sight of a needle. So I got into IT instead after graduating. A few years later, I made the transition to the financial industry, where I ended up leading a team of 17 developers, and we built web-based applications for various lines of business within the bank. It was secure, it was reliable, there was great benefits and pension. The only problem there was I hated it. Okay, I didn't hate it, but it definitely wasn't something I was passionate about. I actually specifically remember the day I knew something had to change. It was like this out-of-body experience where your senses are heightened, because I had just finished my hour-long commute into the downtown core, and all of a sudden I could hear everyone marching to the exact same beat. Everyone's head was buried in their BlackBerries. We were all wearing the same black attire, and there wasn't a single smile in a sea of faces. It was in that moment I knew something had to change. So as alluded to earlier, this started and ended as a passion project. Every single person on our team is passionate about what they do, from art to programming to games and music. We had no funding to get us started, so we spent every night and weekend designing what kind of game this was going to be. The brothers would spend endless hours on the phone with one another from across the country to sort out exactly what the scope was. There was this dream vision and an even bigger scope, and then reality came knocking. We had no money, nowhere near how much we needed. But rather than throwing in the towel using excuses like, well, I guess we just can't do it, we decided to decrease the scope and go full-time. Back then, Chad had a design agency, but had never animated before. Jared was working construction and had never designed a game. I was in the financial industry and had never drawn professionally. I was in my 20s, making a really good salary, 7 months pregnant, so naturally it made perfect sense to quit our jobs, remortgage our homes, and go full-time. Maybe not quite. Let me break that down for you a little bit. Oops, So how did we do it? How did we come up with the design? How did we bring it all together? How on earth did we pull this off? Let's start with the design. When it came to the gameplay, Chad and Jared always knew what kind of games they wanted to make. The first one up to bat was a run-and-gun platformer. The twist was they wanted it heavily focused on boss battles, simply because they loved encountering mid and end-level bosses in the games that they like to play. This was undeniably the easiest decision in the entire game. There was no focus testing or market analysis. It was just a game that they themselves, as gamers, would want to play. The style took some experimentation. After many different iterations, using assorted styles and eras, we settled on the cartoon aesthetic of the 1930s. We loved the style, the cartoons, the rubber hosing, the creativity. It was uber unique by modern-day standards. So we got out a tablet, started animating, but it wasn't that simple. As I mentioned before, we didn't have any previous experience in animation. We didn't go to school for classical animation, but we were self-taught. We researched. We started watching these cartoons that we grew up with, from Disney to Fleischer and many other studios of the era. We would freeze frames and study them frame by frame, how the pen weights varied, how the lines tapered, how something would morph from one object into another. Now that we had a smaller scope defined, gameplay and design were nailed down, we actually had to get even more creative with the execution and production. We had very little money, much less money to lease office space and run that full-time. But where we lacked in using technology for the animation, we made up for in other areas, like having a completely remote workspace, spanning across multiple time zones in North America. This worked for a number of reasons. Opening our minds to a remote workplace, first and foremost, saved a ton of money on overhead, with Toronto being one of the most expensive areas for real estate in the country. Secondly, it worked to help elicit top talent. There aren't a surplus of 2D animators in the industry, so confining ourselves to only look within the GTA just didn't work. And third of all, this worked because it saved us a ton of money. And actually, our team is most creative working various times of the day. You know, boxing them into this 9 to 5 just wasn't conducive to the high-functioning work environment. It wasn't all sunshine and lollipops, though. Not only did it consume every single moment of free time, the delineation between work and life did become slightly blurred, in that whenever we did find a spare moment of time, it was far too easy for us to run back down to the basement and continue working. We didn't have the ability to just walk over to a colleague's desk and see what they were working on, or to collaborate in real time with one another, or to simply take a break at the water cooler. We literally ate, slept, and breathed Cuphead. I even had 2 babies in the 4-year production timeline. I recall planning to take some time off after having my second, and that lasted about 3 hours after I came home from the hospital. I have vivid memories of rolling the bassinet beside me and I would ink as quickly as I could while they slept. And if they woke up and were hungry, I would shift gears and go over to my computer while nursing them and then doing some post-production work on the art. I became really good at using a mouse with my left hand if needed. So, since we worked remotely, we had to do a lot of file sharing, printing and scanning to pass the art throughout various teams. You know, something may have been animated in San Francisco, it gets inked in Toronto, colored in Saskatoon, programmed in Ottawa, QA'd in Regina, you get the point. I remember for the first few months, we actually had no clue how to do things properly, and it was all trial and error. Chad made his own lightbox table to animate, and we basically taped together a 3-peg scanner using some electrical tape to create the contrast between the peg holes, and we would scan things literally 1 frame at a time and wait for the bar to go across, and the next frame. It was painful. It was so painful that we eventually caved to buying a $300 printer from Best Buy that had an automated scanner. We used a very cheap online project collaboration tool called Basecamp. We used that to assign tasks, share ideas, collaborate, transfer files. We also used it heavily for sharing memes and making fun of Jared, so a really all-encompassing great tool. We used Trello for making our lives a little easier with the programming. And we leveraged other applications like Skype, Slack, and email for instant messaging. I'd actually really like to go back through some of those conversations as well, especially in the middle of the night. My point here is that we had to save money anywhere we could, and it was possible. You don't have to have the top line of everything. You know, for the sake of luxury, we made do with what we had. Now, whenever I'm asked about any major milestones or aha moments, partnering with Microsoft was definitely one of them. We were trucking along with our little game. It was Christmas Eve, believe it or not, we were working, and an email came through from one of their people within their business development team named Alexi, and our hearts stopped. That exchange and debuting a playable demo within their booth at E3 2015 served as an affirmation that this just might be something more than a niche following. It helped us really take the next leap. In addition with partnering with Microsoft, we remortgaged our homes at this point and expanded our scope right back to the full vision. Their ID at Xbox team helped us navigate through so many different channels that as an indie developer was completely uncharted territory, from QA to support, marketing, and PR. We had nothing more than a few tweets planned. So they really helped us with that. And no, this isn't a paid sponsorship or an ad. Now that we've significantly expanded our scope, hence the first delay, when it came to quality, we still never took shortcuts in the interest of time, hence the next couple of delays. Beyond seeing the big picture, we paid a significant amount of attention to the small details. It was good enough to have a floating platform, but a floating platform with a little bounce was even better. It would have been good enough to animate 12 frames per second, but 24 frames a second was more fluid, so essentially we doubled our workload. I would have to actually say a low point for me during development directly correlates with visual effects. Oh my God, it was possibly the first time that I felt frustration, believe it or not, throughout the entire production timeline. Every single effect had to be unique to its action, and the more fluid the effect, the better, aka more frames. Like 6,000 individually drawn raindrops for Grim Matchstick Storm Phase, or 600 frames of animation for one water level, or dust or puff smokes ranging from 20 to 100 frames that could never be reused. Thank you, Chad. My point here is we never took any shortcuts in the interest of time and to sacrifice quality. Now, while this story of Cuphead in the media, or maybe even today, very much follows this auteur theory of being the brainchild of Chad and Jared, there was never any id or ego with them. We really embraced fresh perspective. Some days we'd be staring at something for so long and not able to figure out what to do or how to resolve an issue, but as soon as we sought feedback from the team and others, things really started to come together. No matter how many naysayers tried to dissuade us that the notion of a 2D game would ever succeed in today's market, we pursued our vision. While it may have been romanticized in the media, we never took blind leaps into the deep end. We never paid too much attention to what did or didn't sell well in the past. We had a very clear vision, almost like this tunnel vision. It helped not distract us when we were told 2D animation is dead, platformers are archaic, nobody likes a boss rush. What are a couple of my other favorite ones? Oh, that's right, the game is too hard. Make it easier to appeal to more people. These notions, again, all seem to roll off our shoulders because we had such a strong belief in what we were doing. More so, we never embarked on this to create an empire. We wanted to make a game for gaming's sake, and we spent time in the art for art's sake. Above all, and I mean the biggest piece of the puzzle, we worked our butts off. You must have faith in yourself in the process. You must have clear objectives. You must work, but most of all, you must work hard. It's ingrained in the laws of physics. What you put in is what you will get out. There is no elevator to success, much less in this industry. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope everyone enjoys DICE 2018.